knowing like what's going on in the minds of our ideal clients through that client transformation arc we talked about in the previous videos, that is really super helpful for us to plan our content, to understand what touch points people need, and how to frame and what language to use. However, that's all the internal customer journey. So in this video, we're going to discuss that external customer journey. So like basically, how do we take all the things we know about what's going on psychologically, emotionally, like in their daily lives, and like how do we actually represent that via like external facing content? So there's probably as many, like there's a lot of different customer journey models that are out there, and they're all very similar. Some will have like 5 stages, some will have 3, some will have like 7, and you'll hear me kind of like, I'm going to frame this in 3 simple ones, but as we'll kind of get into it, you'll see that there's some variability there, and there's different types of ones even within those broad categories. I do that because when we go into the 4th pillar, which again comes back to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now, that's the actual content creation workflow and your processes, and actually how do you go about writing and implementing all of the marketing that we're talking about in these systems. But we go back to this because at the end of the day, what I've noticed with clients is if they have these 3 things, their system is going to be working. Can you make it more complicated? Can you add more to it? Can you make it more segmented? You can complicate this when you know that it's working for you. But at the barest minimum, there needs to be 3 aspects to this customer journey. And that is awareness, engagement, and conversion. If you have all 3, you are doing really well. But a lot of us, and I include myself in this, we're usually missing 1, maybe even 2 of them. So just to kind of talk about that. So awareness is people who have not heard of your business, like how they find out about you. Right? We need to get new eyes on our business. Even if we are like maybe have higher ticket offers, we don't need that many new clients. We still at least need some new people to find out about us. So some people have maybe like a referral system, and that can kind of be helpful as a good baseline, especially when you're first starting out and maybe you don't have as much time. But this is any type of visibility that you're going to be doing. This could be guest posting, podcasts, like teaching at summits, guest teaching in other people's communities. It could be swapping lead magnets with people or contributing to a bundle. This could be just public speaking in general, especially if you're doing it for free. If you're doing public speaking for free, you should be able to do a call to action that sends people to some sort of downloadable or a book or, something where you can maybe sell from the stage. If you're doing it for free, that's its own, piece that I could talk about maybe at a later time, but I won't right now. But so it's people at that top of the funnel, it's people at the very, and they may be at different levels of that client transformation arc. Maybe they are actively in crisis when they come to you. Maybe they're just kind of at that like symptoms, like Band-Aid stage, and they don't really fully understand how deep the problem goes yet. They still just may be hearing about you in passing. So the readiness of whether they're willing to go down the funnel will depend. But they at least have to find out about you in some sort of way. So definitely having that piece is super important. It's kind of why in the first pillar, the one previous to this, or that growth system, is about being able to pitch, because having that story, you'll be able to find what angles you can start to take to other creators or media outlets or PR or however you decide to go about, building up that awareness strategy. You have a lot of those topics and angles already created through like understanding your story and how it relates to your ideal clients. So I actually look a little bit at it from that point of view versus looking at it from the customer touch points, because again, that can vary based on, when people are finding you. You don't have control. You inherently do not have control over the customer journey as much as, obviously we would like. We can have very strategic touch points, but like, we don't have the understanding, unless you're using really sophisticated software, then you might be able to figure some of that stuff out. But so that's awareness. So you need to have some sort of call to action from the awareness that builds into that engagement piece. Engagement is often what we think about when we think about marketing. It's the social media, it's maybe podcasts or blog articles or your YouTube channel. Maybe you go live on Instagram, or you go live on some sort of, other service. Or your email newsletter is a great example of engagement. It's people who already know about you. It's people who have heard of you from somewhere else. Maybe you met in a networking event at some point, or they found out about you from your awareness building, or, they're there's maybe that referral from a current or previous client. Maybe they go on to your social to find out more about you before they book that call or whatnot. Stuff like that. And we often have this running in some way. I think, like I said, we know that this is some sort of marketing, but but the biggest mistake I think I see business owners make is that they think that that engagement content serves all of the purposes. Like my podcast is my awareness and my conversion and my engagement, and that's not really the case. It can't do all of those things all at once, especially when you're first starting out. I will not say that you won't get discovered because of your podcast ever. Like, that does happen, but you cannot intentionally build it to fit all of the pieces of that customer journey. So just being aware of, this is my engagement strategy. And especially when you don't have a lot of resources, or you have a limited team, or, there's only so much time you can dedicate to marketing, being clear of like, this is the one engagement strategy I'm going to do. I have one awareness, I have one engagement, I have one, conversion, as we'll get more into conversion in the next pillar, because it's all about, like asking for the sale. So again, the sales campaign pillar is going to be way more focused on that, but I do want to touch on all three in this video. But yeah, that engagement piece. And one thing I do separate out is there's ongoing nurture content, like that podcast, like that email newsletter, but there's also things that are a little more just stable and even potentially more comprehensive. In SEO terms, you'll sometimes hear it called skyscraper content if it's like an article, and it's meant to be like this very authoritative, comprehensive piece that gets picked up by search engines, that people will link to. It's a great thing to maybe, like, when somebody is still in like the inquiry phase, hey, if you're wanting to know more about my process, here is, this downloadable resource or article or like private podcast or video training series or like an on-demand workshop. This is typically something that's going to be more evergreen, and that nurture content can have a call to action that's more authoritative. It's like a potentially just a little bit more of a next step. I kind of start here because this is also less of a commitment. When you're like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast, you're signing up for a podcast for the foreseeable future, right? It's not typically going to show results until 6 to 12 months sometimes, or same thing with a YouTube channel. That can even take even longer sometimes, 12 to 18 months. There's a long-term strategy there. You cannot really give up on it in 3 months. But with anchor content, again, you're still engaging with people. You're still giving people a taste of what it's like potentially to work together, or to, or at least to kind of get a peek under the hood of, maybe you're helping them diagnose the problem. We talked about that a little bit in the client transformation arc. So it's something more like it's evergreen, and it's your recurring content can build on top of that, but also it's less of a commitment to you. Like if you say, hey, I'm going to write an email course about my topic, you do that and you set that up in your service provider, and it is kind of one and done. Obviously you're going to want to refine and improve it at some point, but it's not like a podcast or, blogging or a video where you're like, okay, I made another one, now I got to go make the other one, for next week or next month. So there is, I think, something to be said about breaking it apart and seeing. And then also engagement is engaging in your community. And that can be the people who are following you, like live streaming, or maybe having something like a brand community, like a Facebook group or a circle community or a Discord server, which is what I have. Having a way to actually have direct conversations with people, like live streaming is again another example of that, because people can pop in and like ask you questions. Some people do like Zoom networking sessions or office hours. There's lots of ways to have that direct interfacing. And that again can be something that is a little bit lower lift than a recurring nurture content, because it doesn't take you that much prep to go hop onto a Zoom for an hour or like live stream on YouTube. You just kind of decide on a topic, and you can kind of free flow and ad lib it, and you don't have to edit it afterwards, right? So that's another low lift way to do engagement. And then again, from an engagement point of view, if you want people to comment and spark conversations on your social media, the truth is you have to be doing that with other people. You have to set aside time in your calendar to engage with people, and like either ideal clients who have social, or maybe there's peers, or maybe there's complementary service providers in your field that they don't do the same thing, but they talk a lot to the same people, and maybe you guys are having similar conversations about some of the challenges that people are facing. Like it shouldn't feel transactional. It should feel like you're actually legitimately wanting to signal boost people that are doing cool things. Sharing other people's stuff in your stories, that counts as that community engagement. And I believe very firmly in business karma, and that the more you do that, the more that is going to come back to you. Like you share people's stories, they're going to start looking at your stories, maybe sharing your own or commenting. It just, weighing in the other people's Facebook groups about some of the topics that people are maybe having. I also find that if you do that, like in brand communities that are similar to, again, or in that same industry or space that you're in, it also helps you generate more ideas for content. Because if you see similar questions coming up over and over again in a Facebook group, let's say you answer it once. I do this myself. I screenshot my answer and I'm like, I can make that content. I can make that a reel. I could make that a story. Or it's something that I could even make into a fully fledged, full-on video or something, so it goes both ways. Like it's helping other people. It's serving other people in the community. It's also getting like some real-time feedback on what people are struggling with, because let's face it, this is 2025. We're halfway through it as I record this, and 6 months ago looked very different, geopolitically and economically, a year ago. So having that constant feedback from people in your community and in other people's communities, or in other peers or other folks in your network or colleagues that you respect, like just getting a feeling of what's happening in the here and now is going to make the content that you do put out addressing what's going on for people right now and making it more timely. And the more timely it is, the more relevant it'll be to other people. And then, of course, that's what's going to make it perform better. Because if you can hit where people are struggling, or what they find relevant right now, it's going to be more share-worthy. It's going to be more engaging for folks. So people can hang out in the stage for a while. We talked about that in the client transformation arc videos. There's lots of different kinds of decision makers. Again, something that we talked about before. So some people may be in this engagement phase for a while. Maybe they checked out your anchor content. Like let's say they signed up for like your email course or whatever. They looked at it, they got something out of it, and then maybe they drop off and they don't really engage further. And then you do maybe some more of a dedicated push, and they'll be like, okay, I'll join your community, or okay, I'll do XYZ. I'll start subscribing to your podcast, and so there's something to be said about having that recurring content to come out to keep you top of mind, because there is that worry that if the anchor content is really good, that's fine, but will it get seen? Will it get implemented? And like, how can you continue to have and build that relationship? So once people feel like they, because it's up to them, right? It's ultimately, they're in the driver's seat here. We're not. When they feel, oh, wow, okay, so-and-so is doing a summit, and so-and-so is doing a summit, and people are, it's a subject that I find really interesting, or it's addressing a very urgent problem that I have right now, I'm going to join that summit. That's kind of conversion-focused content. It can either be one-to-many, like a summit, or like a workshop or webinar. It can also be like sales content. It can be like, hey, we're in the DMs and we're having, like, I found a resource of mine that I can send you. So there's different there's different strategies in that sales process. But it boils down to, you eventually have to ask for a sale. You cannot make money. You cannot create, you don't have a business if you're not making sales. So just being intentional about when you're periodically going to ask for that sale. Like, let's say you go live every week, but maybe once a month, and I'm using my own conversion strategy as an example. Maybe once a month, it's a longer live stream that is a workshop that you're doing. And that's when you ask people, or tell people, hey, this is what we've accomplished through this workshop. Here are the next steps on how to implement that. Like, join my community, take this course, or let's audit your marketing and sales growth systems to see what needs to be refined and worked on. So there's different ways to call that out. This is where people often struggle, not because they don't know they need to make sales, but because this is so uncomfortable for us. There's a lot going on in our heads when we dare to ask people to work with us. And I do want to acknowledge that, because sales is hard, but once you have figured out, like, hey, monthly, this is how I'm going to do a call to action, and you have the other things in your business working, like you know what makes you different, you've leaned into that story, you know what's going on for them, you know how they can benefit from what you do. You've done the awareness and the engagement piece, and because again, if they can always say no, they can always say, hey, not right now, I'm not ready yet, and they can continue to be in that engagement piece, and that's okay. Like I said, it takes people different lengths of time before they're ready to make a decision. There's different seasons and situations in our own lives where we have been like, I really want to do this, but I just had a kid, or I just switched jobs, or I just moved across country. This is not the right time for me right now. That's happened for you. That happens for our clients. So seeing it as not a rejection, just maybe I need to think about it. I need to pause, and like not letting it feel like it's a direct reflection of what you have to offer, I think is like, this is why this growth system is so important, and each piece of it is important. We'll go more into how to make the sales process less gross in the next growth system, in the story-driven sales campaigns aspect to it. But just know that, being intentional from the beginning and throughout that customer journey is what's going to make that conversion and that sales piece feel less gross for you, because you've thought it through from the beginning, and you're not having to pull out like, oh, buy from me, like from out of nowhere. So I do hope that's helpful. We're kind of nearing the 20-minute mark. So I start breaking this down for yourself. You'll see in the resources, how we go through each of the transformation arc, and then moving into the actual customer conversion cycle. You'll start to be able to be intentional about this from the beginning to the end. So I look forward to looking at it, and I will give you feedback in the Discord group if you want to share it in there. Thanks.